With 2023 closing its doors and 2024 opening its, Arknights has a lot more events that are still happening, like IS4, So Long Adele, and Comp Catastrophes or Wakes of Vultures. But before we look into the future, we should first look at the past, and all of the good and bad Arknights events of 2023. Let's start this list off with a pretty recent event, the one that I will most likely remember for a long time, because it made me suffer a lot. It's definitely Hortus de Capimo. I am mentioning this event now because it's pretty recent, but still deserves a spot on this list. This event had all of the bad mechanics, limited DP, civilians, and a boss that we can't attack, but that debuffs everything deployed. Or just to put it simply, every mechanic that most of us don't really like. Not to forget that these civilians are pretty high maintenance, needing 20 DP to calm down, an event that limits your DP, or 10 DP to build a path that can easily be destroyed, making sure they don't get hit by rocks, or sometimes just having to store them out using fences. This makes this event overall a pretty bad combination of mechanics, definitely deserving on a spot on the bad events of Arknights 2023. We don't only want to talk about the bad stuff of 2023, let's talk about something good. With this would be the event where the Verno Winds will never plow. Overall, Verno Winds was not all too difficult, but it was a lot of fun and had the fun mechanic of enemies climbing on top of the ranged tiles. This finally gives a good reason for ranged units to have a proc count. They also have good use to all phalanx casters with the high defensive abilities. On the other hand, we finally had roadblocks that were able to block more than just 3 units, which would be 30 units instead, and that were also quite tanky, so you could play around with that, creating interesting choke points. And also we have to talk about the boss Jan. Jan was not all too bad to fight. While it may sound a bit overwhelming that a boss that constantly spawns enemies and switches spaces with a decoy, it was not all too hard, and from what I remember, the stages were not all too infuriating. And the event gave us Ling and Saga's competition in terms of screaming. So overall, pretty good event. But not all events in 2023 were bad because the stages were hard. Let's talk about an event that was relatively easy. A Flurry of Flames. This event was not peculiarly hard. The enemies were quite easy to fight, and even the X stages did not prove that much of a problem. Might have been because of Yato and Texas, but this is another topic. Might mainly is a personal issue with me being a Monster Hunter fan. I already went over it in my Wasted Opportunity video. So the TLDR is, it should have been personifications of Monster Hunter monsters, instead of altars for Yato and Noah Korn. Because as I said in this video about Wasted Opportunities, if it was actually been a Nagakuga girl or a Raytheon girl, this event would have been much more memorable and definitely been one of the better events this year. But now, speaking most likely of the best event this year, Lone Trail. Lone Trail was a very good event, with some pretty good mechanics and some very good lore drops. It was fun to play around with the gravity. It added a lot of fun mechanics to play around with. With the exception of maybe S5, all stages were pretty simple and easy doable without much help or guides. Second of all, this event was pretty good for gathering resources, with free resources obtainable from caches every day. Overall, a pretty good event with fun mechanics. And the lore community definitely had their fun, adding more lore to the Doctor and Calcit, and especially people want to know more about Calcit's lore. Okay, but let's move also on to the worst event of 2023. Experimental Operation Pinch Out. Our CC replacement. This was by far the worst event we had. As already mentioned, it was meant to serve as a CC replacement, but what we got was pretty bad. Instead of contracts that increase a risk level, we got contracts that increase like 5 different risks, and all milestones were a weird combination of certain risk values. I remember playing this event on stream and wanting to do all of the milestone challenges, but then I looked at them and was like, oh, gain a clear with a risk of that high. And I did this and I was really confused as to why I didn't get the milestone. And yeah, this would be one thing. The other thing is, these contracts were stupid difficult. And let's not forget that all of the contracts were really stupid, making enemies way too strong. It didn't really feel like the challenge was coming from a contract combination, but from a singular contract making a singular enemy way too strong. We are talking like massive HP and defense increases to the already tanky power armor units, or just making Dorothy able to one-shot everything while she is invisible. This would then lead to runs taking hours to complete, and especially those that are at risk level 600 were quite hard and definitely not fun to do. This really made the main stage miserable to play. But there was a bit of hope. The other stages were okay, and the contracts were much better than from the main stage. And this pretty much was its one redeeming factors, that the other stages that unlocked after some time were definitely the better ones. If Pinch-Out would have been less stupid stats, and maybe more focus on more different stages, it might have been a better event. But now, while Launch Trail maybe was my favorite event of this year, but my highlight event of the entire year is Trials for Navigators. Trials for Navigators was more fun than I thought at first. Having a boss rush event in this game was really challenging and really fun. At first glance it might not seem like it, combining some of the worst bosses in a singular stage. In the end, it was more manageable than you might think, which is weird. It was interesting building teams, meaning using Texas and Yata Ota, to beat 3 different bosses. Even having to use a pre-build team made it pretty enjoyable, because these pre-build teams were comprised of operators that you usually didn't use, but somehow you were able to figure out how to make them work in the stage. Sometimes it was just playing around with a singular archetype of operators like defense recovery defenders, or just using the Nerf family to their full capacity. It added quite a lot of fun to the challenge. And let's not forget that it was not all too frustrating. When you managed to beat a boss the first time around, having a simple help beacon to fasten up the pace of the current stage made it quite good. Even if you would fail a run on the final boss, you could just rush through the other bosses again and get back to the point where you lost. So overall, there wasn't much to be mad about in this event. But let's not talk about the last stage of Navigators 2. I never want to see Emperor's Blade, Anduin and Taluda on a singular stage again. But in the end, definitely was more fun than Pinch-Out. I'm looking forward to when they eventually make Navigators 3, or at least something similar, that offers a good challenge without being absurdly difficult and definitely not frustrating to play. But speaking of Pinch-Out, oh, I'm looking forward to getting CC back. So yeah, this would be it. My Arknights 2023 retrospective. My favorites of last year and my least favorites of last year. Thank you all for watching, and we will see each other again next time. Have a good day and a beautiful new year.